Holly Furtick Book Club. Tonight we're talking about Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This is her newest book. It is hot off the press and I loved every second of it. I can't wait to talk to you about it. All right, so I have been trying to get Ann Patchett to come on our book club for a very long time. And basically was like, I called the bookstore. Her bookstore is called Parnassus. More about that in my story. I called the bookstore. They were like, yeah, we don't do that part for her, so you'll have to talk with her publisher. I tried to get in touch with her publisher, nothing. And I was really sad because I just loved her book, The Dutch House. If you've never read The Dutch House, that's what you're gonna read after tonight. If you finish Tom Lake, you're gonna go back and you're gonna read The Dutch House because it's excellent. And if you like audiobooks, it's narrated by Tom Hanks. So there's that. So anyway, I gave up on getting to talk with Ann about The Dutch House. And then I read her book, the last book that she put out, These Good Days, Old Days. I don't remember the name. It's red cover. I listened to that one and I loved it. And so anyway, I'm a big Ann Patchett fan. And so Stephen and I took Abby to Nashville to see Taylor Swift back in May. And we had a couple other meetings and we were sitting in this meeting and Stephen got up to go to the bathroom. And so me and the lady that was a part of our meeting, we started talking about books. And she's like, oh, I know you like to read. Who do you like to read? And we were talking and, how fun it is when you talk to somebody who loves to read. And so we were like, and she goes, Ann Patchett has a bookstore in Nashville. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. I was like, we're so going there because Stephen had another meeting and me and Abby had like a couple hours to kill before the concert. And so I was like, oh, we're totally going to Ann Patchett's bookstore. So we put it in the GPS and we go and I look at Abby. I was like, oh my gosh, what if Ann is in the bookstore? And of course, Abby's like, that would be awesome. And so I'm like in the car and I'm like, Lord, could you please let Ann be in her bookstore when we go in there? And Abby goes, and Lord, could you please let Taylor Swift play Long Live tonight? And then we were both like, but Lord, we're having such a great time and we're so grateful. And we were just being super silly. So we go in the bookstore and in Ann's bookstore, there's this whole wall of her books and that she signed them all. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going to get Bel Canto for my mom and I'm going to get The Dutch House for my sister and I'm going to get a copy of The Dutch House for myself. And I'm like, and then I see that she has like a book for graduates and my son was graduating this year and I had a bunch of, his friends or whatever. So I have like a stack of like 4 or 5 of her graduates book. And so I'm like walking around her store with like a handful of books and Abby's, off getting whatever fantasy book she's into and that she wants. And I'm like, of course I'm like looking around for Ann. And so I see this lady in a blue shirt and I'm like, oh my gosh, Abby, I think that's her. And I wanted to be sure, right? So I look up Ann on my phone and I'm like, yeah, I think that's her. And so then it was super crowded in the bookstore too. And so it was the most crowded bookstore I've ever been in my life. I don't know if people in Nashville just really like to read or what was going on that day, but it was super crowded. So I find an employee and I'm like, hey, is that Ann? And she was like, yes. So now I'm stalking her. And I've never done this to somebody before, but I'm stalking Ann Patchett. And so she's kindly, so patiently helping this other woman find a book. And this woman is looking for I don't even know. It was a kid's book about a dog, but it's a comic book, a graphic novel. And she's like, I'm so patiently waiting. And she keeps going no, that's not it. And I'm like, ah! And so finally another employee comes up and starts helping them find the dog graphic novel. And so I go up and I tap Ann. You guys, she's gonna be on here tonight. She is on, okay? So I go up and I tap her. I'm like, excuse me, Ann. And she turns around. She's so kind. And I was like, my name is Holly Furtick. And guys, I got so excited that I was like, wanted to cry. I was just so excited. And so I was like, I'm Holly Furtick. This is my daughter, Abby. I was like, I love your books. Thank you so much for putting your stories out into the world. And she was like, oh, nice to meet you. And she goes, would you like me to sign your books? And I was like, you already signed them. She goes, oh no, I'll sign them to whoever they're for. And so she sat down and she like wrote every person's name. I had a copy of one of them for my mother-in-law, and so she asked me how to spell her name, and anyway, it was like the best experience. And so I really wanted to ask her to come on book club. Okay, I did, but more than I wanted her, I didn't want to put her on the spot because sometimes people do that to my husband. And it can be kind of weird. And I didn't want to be like, hey, will you come on my book club? And so I decided, instead of asking her to come on book club, that I would just ask for a picture. And so I said, can we get a picture? And she was like, oh, sure. Let's go to the front of the store where the light's better. And so, Abby's asking if she can come in and say hi. Sorry, I have to tell her that she can come in and say, of course she can come and say hi. But Ann's not on yet.
Oh, she's not?
She's coming on in just a second. I'm telling them my story of how so Ann signed all our books, and then she walked to the front of the store and she took a picture with us, and I posted it on my Instagram story today. And anyway, so Ann, we've already met, but I don't even know if she knows that I was the girl that was stalking her. Well, she's on right now, so she knows. And so I don't know if she knows that I was the lady and her daughter that were stalking her bookstore. We bought a lot of stuff though. We bought a mug. We of course bought the tote bag. We bought all the books. And then I ordered I pre-ordered my signed copy of Tom Lake, and I loved it. Okay, are you ready to bring Ann on?
Yes.
All right. Are you guys ready? Let's go.
Hi. I totally remember you guys.
You do?
No, I totally do, because you sent a picture in. You sent a picture in through my publicist of the three of us.
Oh,
it
I
was
see.
the day. And I saw it, and I was like, I totally remember. And I remember is it that your son is going to Liberty?
Yes.
And
my goodness.
His girlfriend?
And his girlfriend.
And
Yep, we dropped them off last
for
week.
both of them.
Yep.
I don't know why I remember, but I do.
Well, you signed their little graduate books with their
right.
names.
No, that's what I remember.
Yeah, and so we dropped them off, and we think it's going okay.
Right. Good.
My son, like in true firstborn son fashion, called me today, and I was so excited when he called. I was like, and so I answered. I was like, hey, Elijah, and he was like, Mom, I can't find where I'm supposed to be for my class. And I was like, why are you calling me? How would I know? So anyway, I'm so excited that you're here. Abby, are you excited? Abby's first day of school is tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, so Abby, this is what I want to know. How was the Taylor Swift concert?
It was so good. It was so good.
Which night did you go?
not the thunderstorm night.
We went the first night.
That's fantastic.
So we had the best time. And
yeah.
And did you already read all the books that you got at Parnassus?
Yes, they gave one of them to Millie, remember?
Yes.
The one I bought for Millie, and then I bought.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you
No!
want the Summer Turned Pretty there?
Yes.
Because I already talked about it.
You
I
did?
talked about how I read it with you. Well, I listened and you read it.
Yeah, the book was better.
Always.
The book was
So
much better.
you were wondering why the bookstore was so crowded when you were there?
Yeah.
It was Swifties. 3 days. You couldn't drive anywhere in Nashville. You couldn't do anything. We were packed because it turns out Taylor Swift fans are readers.
That's amazing.
And they
we
flooded the bookstore. It was like locusts. They just came and ate up all the books. It was amazing.
You guys were playing Taylor Swift music,
Oh.
and I was freaking out.
We're no fools. We know what we're doing. Sure.
That's
In fact,
amazing.
there's that little golden book of Taylor Swift. You know what I'm talking about?
I know the
kids'
golden
little
book, but I haven't seen
and
the
she's
one
doing this.
Uh-huh.
And we had like 8 copies, and we realized that if we had, say, 8,000 copies, we could have sold them all.
You could have signed them.
That's right. Love Taylor.
That's amazing. Okay, Abby, we're going to talk about
right.
Tom Lake, and you haven't read that, so you need
Hi,
to go.
Abby.
Bye. Love you, Mom.
I love you. Okay.
Also, I want to say, listen, I have never heard that you have asked me on this program before. So I'm sorry.
Well,
It
no,
just
it's-
never got to me because I definitely would have come.
I know, it's totally like I've been doing this for a couple of years, and I find the most success with authors who are active on Instagram because they'll like see their direct messages. So once, and then I didn't even finish saying how we got you is the other thing that I've learned is when an author is putting out a new book, if you find out that they're putting out a new book and then you talk to their publisher,
Right.
then you have a much better chance. So,
And the reason that this got to me is I'm friends with Barbara Kingsolver.
okay.
And she had a really good experience, and she was like, do it. So, yeah.
I had the best time talking to her. Okay, well, maybe you can pay it forward because I really, really also want to talk to Kristen Hanna. So I don't know if you know her, but I've been trying to get her on for a long time too. And I know she has a new book coming out like in February. So
I should be able to find, I think I could find Kristen Hanna for you.
okay, that would be awesome. But I really don't care because I am so excited to talk to you. I pre-ordered a copy of the book, and then your team sent me a copy, and then I found out that Meryl Streep was doing the audio, and audio is my preferred method, and so I didn't even speed it up because I was like,
you can't speed up Meryl Streep.
You cannot speed up Meryl Streep. Although we can all shame my sister who's on here. She did, because my sister has to know how the story ends, and so she has to speed it up. So, but she didn't speed it up as much as she normally does. Okay. So, she said Meryl was too slow. So, okay, I don't even know where to start except to tell you that I also read, for the first time, Our Town. And I sort of, one of the girls that I follow on Instagram who loved Tom Lake, she was like, you have to read Our Town first. I couldn't find an audio copy. And so I'm so slow at reading because I fall asleep at night when I'm reading, but when I'm audiobook, it's like with me all day in the car and doing the dishes or whatever. And so I was sort of reading them side by side, and I realized how much the whole book, it like centers around Our Town. So start with me there. Like, when did you know, how did you decide Our Town is going to be the center of my next book?
Yeah, and you know what I like to say is it's a little bit like Demon Copperhead and David Copperfield. Like, you can totally read Demon Copperhead, and that's something that Barbara says all the time, without going back and reading David Copperfield. I am such a did you read David Copperfield?
No, okay, I just have to say that Our Town was a lot easier to
come on. Our Town it's a play. It takes an hour and a half. Plus you can watch it on YouTube and just watch Paul Newman being the stage manager.
I was scared. I have to let my dog in because he's scratching at the door.
Sure.
I was scared that I was scared to watch it. And I probably should have watched it because I never read a play before. And so I wasn't very good at like the pace of reading a play because my eyes wanted to skip over all the stage direction and stuff. And so I probably should have watched it, but like I looked everywhere for a Netflix version or for an audio or even a reader's theater. I couldn't find anything except on YouTube, and I was scared it was like somebody like iPhone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you know, I don't think that listening to a play as an audiobook would work.
Except sometimes they'll do like a theater.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
so tell me.
Yeah. Okay.
How did that happen?
It was always going to be about our town. I'm obsessed with our town. It's kind of my seminal piece of American literature. My best friend when we were kids, Tavia, her dad was a high school drama teacher. And when we were 9, he did Our Town. So that was when I first saw it. Then I think I read it in school at 14. And I think I've read it every year since, and sometimes twice a year. I mean, I keep it by my desk and I just keep going back to it. It's very meaningful to me. Just reminding me that life is comprised of a bunch of small moments and that if you don't pay attention, you miss your life.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the themes of Tom Nick is that you're getting all these, she's looking back and she's seeing the moments of her life. But I felt like at the end of the book that Emily impacted Laura in such a way that she was like, I am going to live my life and I'm gonna enjoy every second of it.
Right. And I'm gonna live my life and be true to myself, not what other people think that I should want, but what I actually really want.
Yeah. Okay, so usually before I just got so excited to bring you on that I didn't even do what I normally do on my book club.
Okay.
So usually I like to talk about the things that I love about the book. So I love the theme of Our Town. I loved Laura telling the story. At some point, at some parts I thought maybe she was dead. And I wasn't going to know until the end because of the way that you like did the narration where there were times that she was telling the story to her girls, and then there were times that she was just telling the story to me.
Right.
And so I was just wondering if she was like Emily, if she was like dead at the end.
Oh, wow.
So I was really glad that she wasn't, because I didn't want, I don't think I could have taken that.
Okay, let me just tell you, and some people break this rule, but in my mind, if you have a first person narrator telling you the story, that person is not going to die.
Oh.
Because if they're the person telling the story, although that said, I recently read a book in which the first person narrator was like, it turns out she did die and she was telling it as a ghost. And I was like, no, not fair. You're not allowed to do that.
Okay. But like Emily was a ghost.
Emily at the very end, she is a ghost. Yeah.
So that's, I really thought but
she's not telling the story, right? She's not the narrator. She's not in charge.
Right. Okay, good. So I'll keep that in mind for the future, because I really was scared that she was dead. I also have teenagers, and so I loved Emily, the daughter, and how she was like got obsessed with Peter Duke, and how she would not let her family, like she wouldn't stop. I thought you wrote that brilliantly, because I know what it's like to have a teenager like decide that they need something that you're not going to let, or they want to do something that you're not going to let. And I love that. I thought that was brilliant. I loved the reveal of Joe being the husband. Like, I did not see that coming. And I was listening to it and I had this like, oh, and then because you had been so fond of the director and how Laura talked about him as the director. And then the last thing that I wrote down that I loved was I loved the complexity of the character of Peter Duke, because he did everything that I expected him to do. Nothing he did surprised me. And I still, even though I hated him, I still kind of loved him.
Yeah.
Because he was one of those people, right? Yeah. That everybody loves.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just brilliant. Okay, so before I start my questions, can you just start by just reading a selection from it? I love to hear authors read.
Yes.
In their voice.
Okay. Found a part. Not long, just a little bit. This is towards the end and it gives nothing away, but everybody's read it, so I don't have to worry about whether
you can do spoilers, it's fine.
Okay, great. Maisie and Nell get their hats, their bug spray, and go into the great dripping world wearing muck boots. I stay behind to make lunch, which I should have been working on while I was talking all this time. The past need not be so all-encompassing that it renders us incapable of making egg salad. The past, were I to type it up, would look like a disaster, but regardless of how it ended, we all had many good days. In that sense, the past is much like the present, because the present, this unparalleled disaster, is the happiest time of my life. Joe and I here on the farm, our 3 girls grown and gone and then returned, all of us working together to take the cherries off the trees. Ask the girl who left Tom Lake what she wanted out of life, and she never in a million years would have said the Nelson Farm in Traverse City, Michigan. But as it turned out, that's all I ever wanted. I can read one more paragraph, or I can just stop.
Keep going, keep going.
Okay, all right. Once I finish with the sandwiches and put the bags of cookies and chips in a backpack, I walk out past the kitchen garden. The lettuce and tomato plants and zinnias are already straightening up from the beating they've taken. Those tiny periwinkle butterflies are working their rounds. Where do the periwinkles go in rain like that? It's not that I'm unaware of the suffering and soon to be more suffering in the world. It's that I know that the suffering exists beside wet grass and a bright blue sky recently scrubbed by rain. The beauty and the suffering are equally true. Our town taught me that. I had memorized the lessons before I understood what they meant. No matter how many years ago I'd stopped playing Emily, she is still here. All of Grover's Corners is in me.
I love it so much.
Thank you.
So I heard one time, I think it was you. I think I was listening to a podcast with Kate DiCamillo.
Oh, yeah.
She was talking about you, and she said, you write the end first. Is that true?
Well, not exactly. I mean, like John Irving writes the end first. John Irving writes the last sentence of the book before he starts. It's that I know how the book is going to end before I start writing it.
Okay.
So I don't start with the ending, but I have to know how the book ends before I can launch into it. I think about a book for a long time, sometimes a couple of years before I start to write it, and I get it all straightened out in my mind, and then I go forward. So
you almost
I know the whole thing.
You have like a mental outline,
Yeah,
of every character, every major point, and how it ends before you start typing.
yes.
But
I've thought about it for like 2 years or something.
And
so
would you be writing another book while you're thinking about a different one?
Sort of. I mean, I started thinking about this book when I was writing The Dutch House. I was working on The Dutch House, and I thought, I really want to write a novel about our town and about a woman who had played Emily when she was in high school. So that was all I knew. And then I just kept thinking about it, and I was going to write it after The Dutch House, but then I wound up writing These Precious Days. And when I finished that, I was like, the Our Town idea feels old now. And I had a friend, I told my friend Katrina about this story, and she just kept saying, you've got to write this book, you've got to write this book. And so I did.
So you've got it all kind of laid out in your head, and then you start typing.
Right.
And then I heard that you had a very specific typing method with this book.
Yeah, this is the first time I've done this, but I have a treadmill desk. And I've had the treadmill desk I got it for my 50th birthday, and I'm 59. So I've had it for a long time. But I had always just used it for emails and phone calls and that sort of thing. And then for whatever reason, when I started this book, I thought I'm going to give it a try, really writing fiction on the treadmill desk. And I ended up writing the whole thing on the treadmill.
And so you would wake up in the morning, get on the treadmill, and just start typing.
Yep. Yeah.
Is it hard to type and walk at the same time?
No. I could, I could walk you into the other room at the end and show it to you. I have a big external monitor, and I would just plug my little laptop into the monitor. I walk pretty slow. It's 1.5 miles an hour.
Okay.
I would stay on for 2 or 3 hours. And then when I got off, and I would get off because my feet hurt enough. When I would get off, I would not go back to the book. So when I would wake up in the morning, I was like, let's go, let's go. And I was very happy and excited.
And so, like, was it one of those situations where when your body started moving, the story started coming again?
You know, it's not so much that. The sensation was I had this sense of I was walking into the novel. Like, so I get very distracted. Everybody gets very distracted. So if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm writing, there's also part of my brain that's like, what am I going to make for dinner? And I really need to go to the grocery store, and I should do it before school lets out because it will get crowded. And I need to flip the laundry, and I've got to remember to call my mother. And all these things are going on while I'm writing the novel. It's sort of, I call it the squirrels in my head. But when I got on the treadmill, I had this theory that the part of my brain that is interested in the minutia of life and obligation was then focused on walking. So I was like, right foot, left. That's half my brain. And I just had the most amazing concentration while I was writing on the treadmill. I mean, I just really felt like I was not thinking about anything else for that period of time.
Fascinating. So do you think you'll try it again?
Yeah, I think I will. And what's really interesting is, you know, a lot about getting older, but just a lot about writing is about physical pain. And so by the end of the novel, you know, one shoulder is up like this and my hands are killing me and all of that. I didn't have any of that when I was writing on the treadmill. Like, instead of pain being in my neck and my back and my hands, it was all in my knees and my feet. And it's infinitely preferable to have pain from the waist down than it is pain from the waist up. So I really felt so much better while I was writing this book.
Okay, so let's go back to the characters. So you've got the characters mapped out in your mind before you start reading. Do you ever delete a character, or does one become more prominent than the other as you're working it out? As you're like,
usually it's not that I delete a character, it's more that characters will get added.
Okay.
But you know, people love to believe that this whole thing about the characters take over the narrative and they do their own thing. And I don't find that to be true.
Okay.
You know, I just feel like this is what I'm doing. And I always say, like, if I was a contractor and I was building a house, and at some point early on, I decided, you know, I want a main floor master, and I'm going to move the owner's bedroom and bathroom to the first floor. It's not like the house takes over, right? And just like the house has a mind of its own, and they decided that the master bedroom suite should be on the first floor. It's like, no, I got into this and I changed my mind and I started to do it another way. So that, to me, is what writing a novel is like. I changed my mind, but these aren't real people. I am making them up.
So tell me about let's talk about the title, because while I'm reading, when they're at Tom Lake, in the parts of the story where they're at Tom Lake, I'm picturing Dirty Dancing.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay. So I'm just picturing like this whole like camp situation. I had never heard of, what was it called? Like the type of acting they were doing, the summer acting?
Summer stock theater.
I never heard of summer stock theater.
They're everywhere.
And so I was super interested in that. And then also, like, because one of the things I love about fiction is how it's like backdoor learning. So I learned about cherry trees and I learned about summer stock theater. So how did you decide, like, they're gonna all converge here at Tom Lake?
So I have a friend who lives in Traverse City, Michigan, named Erin Whiting. Erin and her husband, Ben, are really good friends of ours. Their dog, Scooter, is the best friend of my dog, Sparky. It's a long story. But Erin grew up on a cherry farm in northern Michigan. And after college, she started a professional theater company with her best friend. And so it was like, wow, I have a friend who has the two skills that I need, cherry farming and running a theater. And so I would send her lists of questions and say, you know, there's so many things that I didn't know, like the fact that you go to a summer stock theater and before it opens, you're rehearsing the first play. But as soon as the first play opens, then you're rehearsing the second play all day. And then at night, you're in the first play. And one night's a musical and the next night's the serious drama. And it goes back and forth. It has such a spreadsheet. It was so complicated. I couldn't believe it. Just the scheduling. And these people work every minute that they're, it is so much work to be in one of these theater companies. And then, you know, all this stuff about cherry farming and tree grafting. And I went up to Traverse City and I was like, okay, I want a farm that's this big and it operates like this. And she was like, oh, I've got a friend who has that kind of farm. So she took me to Barb Wunsch's farm and I rode around and then I took notes and Barb explained things to me. And I was back in Traverse City last week on book tour and Barb like had a lunch party for me. And all the farm workers came and Aaron and Ben and I went back to Barb's farm. It was so meaningful to then go back to all the places. We went to the house, we walked through the orchards, we walked the path through the woods and down to the lake. And I was like, oh my gosh, this place that's been in my mind, it's also real. It's so beautiful.
That's amazing. And you really painted this beautiful picture of this dreamy place. And I really I had such a wonderful journey along in this story that I just let it kind of take me wherever Laura was going. And even though I knew she ended up on a farm, I never really cared about how she got there. You know, I was interested in the story, but it was like, I was just like, oh, eventually she meets a farmer. And that's why I was so shocked when the farmer is the director. And he's like the antithesis of Peter Duke, right?
Right.
He's stable. He's thoughtful. He's like secure in himself. And he's like such a great dad and such a great husband. And then you've got this like Peter Duke character. So tell me more about how did he come to be? You know, you studied cherry trees. What did you, how did Peter come to be?
Yeah, well, for Peter, I didn't have to do a lot of research because I was once a woman in my 20s who dated. And I knew Peter Dukes. And when I was in graduate school at Iowa, they were the poets. You know, they suffered. Oh, Holly, they suffered terribly. They were handsome and they wore leather jackets and sometimes they had motorcycles and they smoked unfiltered cigarettes and they had all sorts of poetry memorized and they would sit in the bar at midnight reading poetry and they would suffer and all of us, we wanted to help them suffer less because we cared about them. You know, they were brilliant, tortured geniuses. And every guy I knew in my 20s was like that. And those guys are so thrilling when you're young and you feel like I can save them. I can fix them up. I can give them a beautiful, stable life, which they don't want. And those aren't the guys you marry. Those are the guys you date. And, you know, then I married somebody who was wonderful and very much like Joe Nelson. And so it's a lot about trying to explain to these daughters who love their father, like what you love when you're in your 20s, that's not what you love later on in life, if you're lucky.
Yeah, and the way that the mom is like, in some ways, at first I kind of felt insulted for Joe because especially Emily, she's like, why didn't you marry Peter Duke? Like you could have, look at what you could have been.
Yeah.
And the whole time she's trying to get them to see, no, what I have is the ultimate fulfillment in life.
Yeah.
And so I just love that. I love that message. And I love, like we all know a Peter Duke. And the thing about them is that they're like enrapturing when you're around them. Like they just fill a room. I mean,
Yeah.
I can think of a couple different people that I know, and they truly fill the room with their presence, but yet their presence is so overbearing when you're on the outside looking in. But when you're in there with it, you know,
Yeah.
you can feel it. And I loved how you gave all these little, like, I don't know, like these little Easter eggs of how it wasn't going to go well for him later. You know, like how he's up late at night, obsessively writing about the character. And the scenes where the part I was telling my husband about how he was like when they did the other play, how he was wanting to actual drink real tequila while they were acting.
Right.
And just all these little nuggets that you're giving along the way. As a 43-year-old woman, I'm going, oh God, she needs to get out. She needs to get out. Because I didn't know how it was going to end for her. Was there anything that you held back from with him? Were you purposefully making him vague in like how it ended for him?
What do you mean?
Well, I like how it felt like, you know, you can give people, I think the way I've heard it said before, I always botch these kind of little statements, but you can give people 2 or you can give them 1 + 1. And I felt like you gave me 1 + 1 with him. Like you weren't necessarily spelling it out about Peter Duke, but obviously, but then you were giving us these little hints about how almost like you were talking to Emily, like he's not this amazing life that you think he is on the screen.
Well, but he, you know, that's the thing. He really is an amazing actor.
Yeah.
He's incredibly talented and he cares passionately and he works really hard and he's all about the craft. That doesn't mean you want to date him.
Right.
Or it doesn't mean that you want to date him for the summer. So, but I'm wondering, because we have no spoilers, which is so weird for me because I'm not used to being able to talk about anything. But are you asking me if he killed himself?
Yeah.
Oh, because he totally
did. Because you said he swims away.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if he killed himself or if it was like a drug, if he was like drunk.
No. He drowned himself.
Because in the end, he was this amazing person that everybody loved and admired, but he never really loved himself.
Yeah, I think that's, or maybe he loved himself too much. I mean, he was really tortured.
Yeah.
And had some big issues. I mean, the part where she's saying to the daughters, oh, he was crazy. And the daughters were like, oh no, you can't say that. You can't say crazy. But he was, you know, he was brilliant and talented, but he was also crazy.
And she knew it from the minute that she heard that he drowned. She knew it.
Totally.
Do you think the girls knew it?
Yeah, I do.
By the end of the story. All right, so go back and tell me about the daughters. How did you decide how old to make them and how many of them to be? How did that, when you're plotting through this story in your mind, how are you giving her a family? Why were they all girls?
I love having a lot of characters. And one thing that always bugs me when I read a novel where it's like an only child who marries an only child and there are no secondary characters and they have one child. I'm like, life is never like that. You know, I like it when it's sort of big and messy and I can deal with a lot of people. And they were always going to be 3 girls. And I think because it's fiction, you know, everything is in 3s. It's like the 3 bears and the 3 wishes. And, you know, you want 3s. One thing on this book tour that has blown my mind, how many women have come up to me and said, oh, I have 3 daughters. And I just feel like if I just sold this book to women who had 3 daughters, it would be a huge bestseller. Because there are so many women, it turns out, who have 3 daughters.
family of
There-
three daughters.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And it's just, that's a really interesting dynamic.
Yep.
It's a really, the dynamic of three, and these girls are very different and they really love each other. And I like the fact that Emily was really, really impossibly difficult when she was a teenager, but then she grew out of it. That's always really fun to let characters change.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, you were an awful teenager. Also, I have women coming up to me in the line saying, oh, I was the Emily. I was the really, really bad one.
But it was really beautiful the way that you gave us a healthy family. Because there's so many books on dysfunctional families. And I think that even though there was a lot of grit and sadness in this story, at the core was this beautiful, healthy family. And they weren't perfect, but they weren't this like complete disaster of dysfunction. And yes, teenagers, they grow out of it. And there's like, it was just so wonderful. I felt like to read that part and to know that there are families like that in like, because when you read, I mean, I know that there are families like that. I came from a great family. I have a great family. I know lots of people who have great families. Sometimes when you read, it's only about the dysfunctional families. And it was just nice to see a family navigating the dysfunctions of the world and the dysfunctions of their past, and these girls coming in to seeing their mom through adult eyes, which is, it was just this, the themes in the book were everywhere. And I just loved it so much. And I'm just so grateful for people like you who push through and who write these stories. Was there anything like when you were done and you sent it off, did you feel finished? Did you feel, did you have a hard time finishing it?
No, I didn't have a hard time. I never have a hard time finishing. It's funny. I am a slow starter. I have a really hard time starting. Once I get to page 80, I'm pretty good. And I am a solid finisher. I have a really good friend who's an amazing starter, but has a really hard time finishing, which means he's got like 12 books that he's written the first 100 pages of, but then he wanders off. It's like, if I can get to the first third or the middle, I'm absolutely going to finish, and that's not a problem. And then I have a lot of good friends who read my books for me, and I read their books for them, and we give each other notes. And then when I have it all finished, I hand it in.
Do you have a favorite character
in this book? I really, it's so funny because when you say favorite characters, then I always think more of the secondary characters than I love Joe and Laura, but I love Maisie. I really love Maisie, and I really love Sebastian.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Sebastian.
Okay, you want me to tell you a story about Sebastian you're going to find really interesting?
Yes, please.
The hardest thing, before I started this novel, and this sounds crazy, the hardest thing for me to decide was whether or not Laura would tell the story or Sebastian would tell the story.
Okay.
Now, if it had been Sebastian telling the story, it wouldn't have been about the farm. It wouldn't have been about the three daughters. None of that would have been in there. But it would have still been about that summer and what it would have been like. I'm so interested in what it would have been like to be Sebastian. And sometimes I think I might write this book again from
just thinking that
from Sebastian's point of view, and that it wouldn't really be about the summer at Tom Lake, but what it would be like to be the brother of such a famous man who you were always having to pick up and take care of, but he's always out in front. So
okay, a couple questions. Did you try to write through Sebastian first?
No,
or you just
I just did it in my. I do everything in my head.
Okay, so have you ever written a sequel before?
No, and this wouldn't be a sequel. It would be more like a parallel.
But you have the same characters, like, and you can bring in. They can do like cameos.
I would have the same characters, but in the story of Duke and Sebastian's life, Joe and Laura wouldn't be important at all.
Right.
You know, so it would be just an entirely different story.
Okay, well, I vote
Okay.
yes for you to write that.
That's good to know. I might do it.
Are you working on something else?
No, all I'm doing now is signing my name. And I do it from the minute I wake up in the morning. So, I was just signing my name. So this is called a tip sheet. And what they do is you sign these and then you mail them back. And during production, the publisher has them sewn into books. So that means that they can have a case of signed books in Nebraska or South Carolina or, you know, someplace I didn't go to this time, but they can sell signed books.
Do you just
So
sign
all
your
day
name?
long, all day long when I'm home, I sign my name and then I go back out on tour because tour is huge and endless. And then I sign real books.
How'd you get Meryl Streep to read the audio?
I asked her. So 15 years ago, I had lunch with Meryl Streep. And there was a period of about 7 minutes when she was interested in playing Roxanne Koss in the movie of Bel Canto.
Okay.
And it didn't work out, I'm very sorry to say. But it was sort of an intense thing. And I really wanted her to do the audiobook, or I wanted to ask her because she has 3 daughters and I just thought she would be perfect. So my agent is a woman named Felicity Blunt. And Felicity Blunt is the sister of Emily Blunt, the actress.
Okay.
And Felicity is married to Stanley Tucci, who played Meryl's husband in the movie Julie and Julia.
Okay.
So I called Felicity and I said, if I wrote a note to Meryl, would you send it to her? And Felicity said, no, but here's her email. And so she sent me her email and I wrote her a really short email. I told her what the book was about in 4 sentences. And I said, you know, is there any chance you might consider doing this? And she wrote me back the next day and she said, this is great. She said, I'm so honored that you would think of me.
Wow.
And she was like, of course I'll do it. And I said, don't you want to read the book first? And she was like, no, it sounds great. And she did it. You know, once Tom Hanks has recorded a book, it sort of makes you feel empowered. And you're like, well, because I couldn't believe I had asked Tom to do it. And he said yes. And I was like, well, why not ask Meryl then?
Well, all right. So who would we ask to read if you wrote the story through Sebastian's eyes?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. I mean, Tom Hanks, when I got Meryl, he was like, why didn't you ask me to do it again? And I said, well, because it is a female protagonist. So, I mean, maybe I would go back and ask Tom again. I don't know.
He was amazing on
so good. He was so good. And Meryl was so good.
And yeah. Oh, and it was incredible. Okay. I thank you so much. I don't want to take up much more of your time. I love to ask authors about what they like to read. So I'm going to ask you something really specific first.
Okay.
Is there an author that you're like, I've read every single one of their books?
Oh my gosh, so many of them.
Tell
Elizabeth Strout, Colson Whitehead, Louise Erdrich, Miley Malloy, Toni Morrison, James McBride, who has a new book. James McBride has a new book out that I love, Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. Colson has a new book out, Crook Manifesto, that's fabulous. But yeah, once I get on to somebody, and especially if I know them,
yeah.
Kate DiCamillo, the second, yeah,
I love her.
I love her. This book is dedicated to her.
It is. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
She's. I was a teacher for 3 years, and I always read Because of Winn-Dixie to my students, and I read it to all of my kids too. It's one of my favorite books. It's probably in my top. I don't know. I have a lot of favorite books, but
and let me just say, my favorite is The Magician's Elephant.
Yeah.
Which they just made a great movie out of.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen it. All right. Tell me another one. I know you've got one that you were, Lindsay Lynch. I haven't read it yet.
Do tell. by Lindsay Lynch. So Lindsay works in the bookstore, and she is 32. She came to work for us when she was 21, and she went off and went to graduate school, but she has worked so hard and she did such a good job, and she's like my little bookstore daughter. I'm just so proud of her, and she had a lot of rejection and she just kept pulling herself up and working and trying again. It's a book about the golden age of Hollywood. It's got a little bit of a thriller aspect. It has an incredibly beautiful ending. It's a summer read, but it also has a lot of substance, and I'm incredibly proud of her. So, you know, I just think people need to take a chance on new writers.
Yeah.
Because that's how careers are built. So support Lindsay Lynch. This is great.
I have a theory that a lot of times somebody's first book is their best because it's the one that they've been working on for so long.
Yeah, I hope that's not true for me. Here, come here.
Aww.
Sparky just came in. Sparky Van Devender of Parnassus Books.
He's on the cover of These Precious Days.
That's right. And he's on Instagram every Tuesday on the Laydown Diaries. Me and Sparky and Lindsay, we do this. And we recommend books every Tuesday. And let me tell you, this is what I want to read next.
Oh, you're going to love it.
My husband read it and he cried at the end. And it's so funny because I have a galley, I have an advanced reader's copy that we had given away. And I said to my husband today, we've got to get the galley back because I can't read the hardback. And I tried to listen to the audio and I just thought, I've got to read this. I can't follow the audio.
Yes, because there is a learning curve with the setting being in India. And there's a lot of words when you're listening to the audiobook that you may not know, you know, like that it's like a slang for the term brother.
Right.
And you don't know, it's really hard to keep up with the characters doing the audio at the beginning. And so I would definitely say if you like to read actual books that I would recommend reading that one, but you're going to love it. But don't listen to Oprah's. I'm very mad at Oprah because she said on her Instagram,
don't tell me.
You can listen. She did like 6 parts, the 6-part podcast, and the book's in parts. And so I swear it said you can listen to the parts as you read the book, but then it spoiled like a huge part of the story for me. And so I was kind of bummed, but I still absolutely love it's phenomenal. You'll love it. And it's so fun to have a book that's that long that you love because you're not, you know, it's so sad I was sad when Tom Lake was over. I was like, oh, I'm gonna miss them. You know, like you get so into, and there's characters in that book that will like haunt you for days, just thinking about what would Big Amachi do here, and it's just wonderful. So you're gonna love it.
He's a great guy, and obviously he's a doctor, and he came to Nashville to do an event at Parnassus, and he and my husband's a doctor, and they really bonded. So I'm excited about that. Hey, I want to tell you about a book that you need to keep an eye out for that's coming out in November.
Okay.
And it's the best book of the year. It's called Absolution by Alice McDermott.
Okay. The best book that you think it's the best book of the year?
Yes. I think it's going to win the Pulitzer.
Okay.
And I also think that you would love it. It's a very, very beautiful book. And I blurbed it and I called it a moral masterpiece. I don't know if you've read Alice McDermott's books before.
Think so.
Oh, I love her. She's somebody also. I read every single one of her books. And this book, in the same way that Demon Copperhead, like Barbara's an amazing writer, but Demon Copperhead is the best. And Alice is an amazing writer, but Absolution is the best.
It's her best work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's brilliant. She's been finalist for the Pulitzer 3 times.
So which one, if I'm going to read one while I'm waiting of hers, which one would you tell me to read?
You don't need to wait. Just call the publisher. They'll send you a guide. It's
Not me.
Yeah, Farrah Strauss. Tell them Ann Patchett sent you. But her last book was called The Ninth Hour, and it's wonderful.
Okay.
So you read that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being on tonight. Keep writing. I'm just like, so I'm also going backwards and reading more of yours. My next one that I want to read is Bel Canto, because somehow I've never read that before.
Okay. Did you read Commonwealth?
No, I haven't read that one
That's
either.
my
Commonwealth is your like
That's my story.
biography.
That's, well, yeah. I mean,
in a fiction form.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you ever want to know anything about me, Commonwealth.
Well, I feel like I know a lot about you from reading These Precious Days.
Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly.
I know about your fathers. I know about so many things. Okay, so I'm gonna, next time I see you, if I come to Nashville, I'm gonna come to your bookstore and I will have read Commonwealth and Bel Canto and Absolution.
Let me know. I mean, let me know in advance that you're coming. And I'm so glad that I was there. That's a beautiful thing. And so funny that I remember you and Abby.
It was so great.
When I saw your picture, I was like, I totally remember them.
Because I'm sure you meet lots of people. So.
A lot. A whole lot. Yeah.
I tried to be really kind about it, but I also, sometimes you just can't help it when you meet somebody that you were like really looking forward to meeting.
You were great. You were both terrific.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I so enjoyed talking to you, and get back on the treadmill and tell us about I forgot his name. I want to call him Sergio. What's
Sebastian.
His name? Sebastian.
See, it's Saint. Do you know Saint Sebastian?
Yes.
With the arrows, you know, because Saint Sebastian just suffers and suffers and suffers, and that's why he's Sebastian.
I need you to get back on the treadmill.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Holly. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a great night.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed Tom Lake, and I hope you enjoyed talking with Ann as much as I did. She was amazing. Hello, she wrote a book walking on her treadmill. Hey, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to make sure to share it, share the book with someone, share the book club with someone. Hey, if you're not a part of our book club, it's super easy to join. Just go to hollyfurtick.com, give me your email, and all I'm gonna do is send you an email once a month and let you know what we're reading and when we're meeting, and then you can join us for the live discussion. I hope you have a great night. Make sure you share, turn on the notifications so you can get more videos just like this one, and I hope you have a great day.